Well, hello and welcome to PM Express. And simply, we are talking jobs. Jobs. Since the time I could remember following the news, it has always been a news item. It has always been a political campaign promise that we will create jobs, we will find jobs. But you and I know that in the nation, at every given time, there are so many people chasing so few jobs. It's gotten to the point where even if you say to somebody, I work at this bank, they ask, who did you know and how did you get it? It's as if you can't even get a job by merit anymore. It has to be somebody who knows somebody who pointed the finger before you get the job. What is job? How does it get created? And why is there so few jobs in the country and so many people chasing jobs? Unemployed graduates, students, that's university graduates, students who have finished SHS are also chasing jobs, and it's all jobs. President has just announced the Nation Building Corps proposed to give 100,000 people job opportunity, temporary. You get in there for 3 years, find you an exit plan, and probably the next batch of 100,000 joining. Is that what is going to mitigate our job crisis? Today we're going to find out what job is, how it is created, and why there are so few of it. And I have a man who has a thing or two about what the meaning of job is. Don't go away. Well, thank you very much for staying. And jobs, with me in the studio is Professor William Barber, who is a labor economist. Prof, thank you very much. I've been chasing Prof for a while now. So we are grateful we have jobs. We have Prof in here. Prof, I just, talking a very technical matter, and I'm hoping that we do it in English so that we all get to understand it. And as I said, before we got in there, that you broke single spine so simple that, we all understood it. Let's start with jobs. I mean, what is jobs? And then we'll break it down. What is a job?
Well, no, thank you. It's been a very difficult time to get here because we have a lot of stuff to cover, especially getting to the end of the semester. We have to prepare for exam and stuff like that. Now, coming back to your question, what is a job? Normally, we try to look at job as similar to employment. And in the developed world, when we say a job, you expect that somebody is engaged for a period of time. But in our part of the world, when we say job, it doesn't necessarily mean employment. So when you say job is engagement in economic activity for pay in cash or sometimes in kind. So we expect that if you go to, let's say in the village, you have people, farmers, going out there to get some laborers a day, take them to the farm, they work for them, they pay them, they come out, they come from the farm. That particular day, that farmer has provided job opportunity for that particular laborer. I mean, if in the construction sector, you find people being engaged as to provide some kind of services. For instance, laborers will carry mortar, blocks. We have people who will be, the masons who will be laying blocks and so on. At the time of construction, these people are provided jobs, but they are not necessarily employed. So you can say that job is engagement in economic activity where an individual is able to sell his labor service for wage within a period of time.
So that's the big confusion, job and employment.
Yep.
Now, why do we find ourselves where we are now? I mean, are we saying that there aren't enough people who want to engage, in a job to get a wage? What is the big shortage?
Well, if you use the word job, I can tell you every day and every now and then jobs are being created.
So employment.
But I can say that employment is where the problem is. Jobs are being created, but employment is not being generated the way it is. What is employment? Mm-hmm. Employment is an outcome of the interaction between labor demand by employers and labor supply by workers. So the moment you say employment, I have brought out two things: labor demand, labor supply. So I am in the market. Every market has a buyer, has a seller. So you go to the market, there's a goods market, you have a buyer, you have a seller. You go to the money market, you have buyers, you have sellers. You go to the exchange rate market, you have buyers, you have sellers. You go to the labor market, you have buyers and sellers. And who are the buyers? The buyers are the employers, the firms. And then who are the sellers? The individuals who are offering their labor service. So in the developed world, because the labor market is well structured, I mean, even if you are doing part-time job, you are paid through the banking system. You are supposed to pay your tax, you have your social security, and so on. Even if you are engaged within a period of 6 months, if you are a student and you are working, you still have your social security number, and therefore you pay social security, you have your tax, and so on and so forth. That particular type of job is equivalent to employment.
Okay.
So in the developed world, the type of employment that dominates the labor market is wage employment. That is working for somebody to pay you. The last time that I checked, I mean, today we had a conference, and the presentation that I made, so I remember in high income countries, you have 84% of employment being wage employment. That is working for somebody to pay you. When you come to our part of the world, like Ghana, wage employment accounts for just a quarter of total employment. So the dominant type of employment is self-employment, where you have an individual being the employer and an employee at the same time. So if I am a farmer, I employ myself, and then I also work for myself. So the employer and the employee are the same. So in Ghana, self-employment is the dominant type of employment.
Well, what percentage?
Self-employment will be about 57% or thereabout. And even self-employed, there are some people who are self-employed and have engaged some people. Mm-hmm. So maybe your boss, Kosichum, I'm sure maybe he has employed himself here, but he also has employees. So he will be an employer or self-employed with employee. But you can find somebody who is selling oranges. That person is own account, because that person is working, and that particular kind of activity belongs to him or her, and therefore he doesn't have anybody he has employed, so he's an own account work. So this is the dominant type of employment, and that type of employment is considered to be vulnerable or precarious, because it doesn't give you that constant stream of income. I mean, well, if you are lucky enough and then the business is good, market is good, then you get sales and so on, then you're happy. You go to Kaishi, I mean, some people can, I mean, some traders will be there for the whole day and they may not be able to get what they want. You meet these young people who be selling, let's say, watches, battery here and there and so on. They are working by ILO standard. So you can see that type of work is very vulnerable because it doesn't earn them enough. That income is not a constant stream of income. And therefore, when there is any negative shock, it becomes very difficult for them to withstand it. So that is the major type of employment that we have in our part of the world. And it is also very difficult to regulate it in terms of what we call the labor standards. I mean, the ILO has a lot of conventions. If you're talking about minimum wage, an employer is supposed to make sure that he pays worker not below a certain way. And I am employing myself. How can I enforce something which I am the employer and at the same time employee? So enforcing some of these standards within our setting is limited to what we call wage employment.
How is there a formula to graduate the watch repairer, the battery seller, the orange, the shoemaker, the coconut seller. Is there any way to sort of formalize them or move them into meaningful employment or secure employment?
Well,
is there a formula, or they stuck there?
It should take a longer time. I mean, first, that particular individual, and it depends on the system. And our system is such that informality thrives. You go to advanced countries, I mean, let's say, even in Africa, you classify Africa into two. Southern Africa, if you go to South Africa, I don't think you will get people just spreading coconut and selling, because over there informality is very minimal. The formal sector is very high. But you come to Ghana, you come to Kenya, you go to Nigeria, you go to Rwanda, you go to some of these countries, informality thrives, because I mean the system is such that it becomes necessary. You just put your table there and you can sell something and people will buy, and therefore you have some engagement or economic activity that you are engaged in. So where we have that kind of informality, you need to see how best you can make them formal, and it depends on the way the structure of the economy is. It starts from our system. Even ID system is not working in Ghana. I don't have a national ID. I don't know whether you have it.
No, I don't have the national one.
So that is...
I have a voters one.
Yeah, voters one, but you don't have national ID. So the system of even identifying the individual in our part of the world is a big issue. House numbering system. I mean, to be able to know my house number, even though I know my house number to be this number, I don't know whether it has changed, your street number and so on. All these things are lacking. Therefore, if you want to make sure that things are formalized, all these things must be put in place, so that if I have to even go to the bank, I'm a coconut seller, and I still want some small kind of facility to be able to push me up. It could be even 1,000 cedis, and I can approach, let's say, a microfinance company or a bank. I mean, bank will be a big microfinance company. The microfinance company will be able to identify me because I have an ID number. I even have social security number. I have my TIN. So it's easy to be able to identify me. I have my house number, you know my street, I mean, and so on. So if I run away, you know who to touch and so on and so forth. So when you have that kind of thing, then you'll be able to get these people know what they are supposed to do. And if you go in for that facility of 1,000 cedis, you know that I'm supposed to pay at this time. So your behavior in doing your work will also change. So we have to start from that angle, making sure that we put the systems in place. You can hold your ID card and say, this is me, and I have just one number. And I'm told in Denmark, even if you are an alien, you go there, they give you a number. So when you are leaving, they know that you've left. If you go to the pharmacy shop to buy something, they know that you have bought this. Everywhere, your ID number identifies you. So that is the starting point. And if you have these systems put in place, then it means that you'll be able to identify everybody. And that person, when he's going for a facility, the bank or the microfinance knows that if it becomes necessary, he will be able to get his money back. And that is where that formality could start better.
Okay, so that's the informal side. We have a challenge there. But then we have a whole chunk who have come through your class, who are now cratching for and have come out and are also crying to say, oh, we don't have employment. So where's their challenge coming from? Are they just refusing to work, or genuinely they can't find work?
Well, it's quite interesting. This issue about finding it difficult to get employed or getting employment is not peculiar to Ghana. Let me put that way, so that it doesn't become like Ghana is the only country that has that problem. No. I mean, it's global. Now, to get people employed, the economy must grow. That's the first and foremost. The economy, so that's the demand side. If you are able to grow the economy, growing the economy means that you have production, you have economic activity expanding, you have manufacturing doing well, you have agriculture, you have all the sectors doing well. And as they do well, they don't do well in isolation. They use human beings, they use manpower to be able to come up with those outputs. And using that manpower means that they are employing. So if an economy is growing, first and foremost, it helps to create jobs. That's the demand side. And the growth must be of good quality. And I must emphasize, yes, you can grow. That is what we say the first order condition. First, you must grow, because if you are growing at 3%, you will not be able to absorb that number that you want compared to growing at, let's say, 10%. But then that 10% should come from sectors that are known to create jobs. One of them is manufacturing, one of them is agriculture. Somebody will say, well, other sectors like extractives don't create jobs. Yes, they don't create direct jobs, they don't create direct employment, but they create indirect jobs. For instance, we got oil, and oil production doesn't create that number of employment that we want. But the returns that we get as a country could be used to invest in other areas that will generate that kind of employment. So if it comes from these areas, I always use agriculture, manufacturing, and tourism as the sectors that have higher labor absorption, that is direct jobs. Then those areas that we think are not employment friendly, the returns there could be used to be able to support these sectors and generate second round of jobs or employment, as it were. Then we have to come to the supply side. There may be job opportunities because the economy is growing, but you also have to get the quality of labor, the quality of human capital to be able to fill in the jobs. And I'm sure you've heard of skill mismatch, because the kind of skills that are coming out of our universities is not what we are looking for. And we have to also understand that in perspective. When we say the kind of talent we are looking for is not what is there, it doesn't necessarily mean that you do this particular course and therefore you cannot get a job. The most important thing is that that particular skill that is coming out, that individual should be talented, that person should be smart, and that person should be developed in such a way that he will be able to adapt to certain situations. It's not that I did economics and therefore I have to go to the bank. You can do philosophy and you can still work in the bank, because you've been trained in such a way that when you get there, you'll be able to solve problems. Because these days, we don't have to put our minds on training people for a specific job, because if you train that person for a specific job without training the person to think in a smarter way, the world is changing so fast. The global job market is changing so fast, such that if you train the person for a particular kind of activity, by the time the person finishes education, that activity has changed. And I'll give you an example, as I normally give. In, I think, 2013, thereabout, one of our Independence Day, journalists were put on a tipper track to be able to capture scenes. I don't know whether you remember.
Yes, I remember that.
So if you were trained as a journalist to be able to climb a tipper track at the time, now we have drones. So now drones are used to capture scenes. So it means that you were trained to be able to climb a tipper track, but now within 2-3 years it has changed. So if you don't know how to use drone, you are not trained to be smart. That's when the system changes. When the global environment changes, you'll be able to adapt. Then you will become unemployed. That is sometimes we call the structural unemployment. So when we are talking about training the human capital to be able to adapt, to be able to be productive, it is important that we emphasize how to train the mind to be able to be smart and fit into any situation that you find yourself. There are so many people who are in journalism who didn't go to GIJ, but perhaps because of the kind of training that they had, when they came into your fold, some few training, then they pick it up. So we need to get the supply side quite well, get the kind of skill that we are trained to be very smart, to be very productive, to be talented, to know where they are going. And then the economy must also grow to be able to create that job opportunity so that it fits into the two.
So, in short, with the graduate unemployment now, the economy is simply not growing enough.
the economy is not growing enough compared to the number that are coming out. And sometimes too, the expectation of people who are coming out also becomes a problem. Many a time we may want, I mean, you finish the university, you think that as soon as you start, you have to get here. I mean, I should be able to get my car, get a place. I mean, so you also need to start from somewhere. We also need to look at expectation. A paper that was done on Ghana looks at what determines unemployment in Ghana, including youth unemployment, and one of them was expectation of the young people. So I want this reservation wage. If I don't get this kind of wage, I will not take it. I mean, I also heard this nation builders crop that we talk. I mean, people are saying, well, I don't think 700 is enough, but I think it's also a starting point. I always say that something which is, when it comes to wages, income, the moment it is more than zero, it's better, because something more than zero is better than zero. So you start from somewhere and then move on. So sometimes our expectation as young people also tend to also keep us jobless.
I'll come to Nation Builders core, but how about our general attitude towards work? Is it also playing a factor in what's happening? Because people complain that, look, I hired him, he turns up at work late, you know, doesn't want to use his own initiative, and therefore, look, get out, let me find somebody else. Is that also contributing, or that's...
It does a lot, and it's also part of the training. As traders, we need to inculcate in the people. If you meet a Ghanaian and you say, can we have an appointment, what time? So, okay, can we meet at 4, 4:30, 5, 6? So what time are we meeting? If you say we can meet at 4, 4:30, 5, 6, 4:30, 5 or 6. So that has been our orientation. But we should know that, as we always say, time is money. This time, which is about 9:30, today is 8 May, will never come back. So if you have the opportunity to utilize it and be productive, and you say, well, I will do it tomorrow, this time will not come back. If we have this in our minds, and this can be done by inculcating it into our education system. I'm sure you have the opportunity to study outside. If you study outside, you realize time management is very important. Sometimes you are given, I mean, I had the opportunity to study outside, and when you are given problem set or assignment, and they say, bring it at 12:30, you are bringing it, not, there's no human being standing there to collect it. It's like a post box. So when you do it, you go there, then you put it in. As soon as it's 12:30, it's closed. When you go there, you can't put it there, and there's nobody to beg and say, oh, when I was coming, the train delayed, and so on. No. Time is time, and you will be punished for that. So when you go through this kind of training, you know how valuable time is. But in our part, maybe when you give assignment to a student and he comes late, oh, you see, my father was this, my mother fell sick, and so on. And sometimes when you even organize a test for your student, somebody will write, oh, I have a funeral to attend, I have appointment at the British Embassy, or let's say British High Commission, and so on. And so it means that we ourselves don't value time. So as trainers, if we inculcate that into the students, for them to know that time is important, we'll be able to also increase productivity as well. And we should know that when we go to work, we are there to work. I mean, many a time we go to work and then we chat. I mean, we are selling, we are buying, and so on and so forth. It doesn't, and it also depends on the supervisor as well. So our attitude towards work is very, very, very important, and we need to respect time.
The 1 hour, this 1 hour is not enough, but we'll try as much as possible. Look, 100,000 nation builders core, 700 cities into various sectors. Positive thing, negative thing, would it mitigate? What are the exit factors? Is it sustainable?
Well, last Saturday I was asked the same question, waste of money. You know, journalists, they have a way of asking the question, but I always put it in a broader context. If you are a father and then your children are hungry and they are complaining, that they don't have food. Then you say, oh, don't worry, my salary will come. So when it comes and so on. But the children are complaining. So you have to find a way to get them something to eat so that you can have time to think. So in labor market policies, we have, apart from having what we call active labor market policy and passive labor market policy, we also have the time frame of policy, the short term, the medium term, and then the longer term. So the longer term, I will start from there. The longer term, I mean, as the name implies, is long. That is where you expect policies to be put in place. Private sector will respond, expand, and then employ more people. So if you have policy like agricultural policy, that will mechanization of agriculture, getting the human capital that can drive that kind of policy. You have, you call one district, one factory. This is industrialization. You expect that the private sector will respond. You have the environment stable. I mean, if you have the macro environment quite stable, the banks are willing to give out loans, facilities, and so on. And private sector will also be able to pay back. So that will take some time. And you cannot just do it within a short period of time. So you need, while the young people are complaining that they don't have employment and so on, and you say, well, I am doing one district, one factory. I'm doing one village, one dam. Wait for me to finish that. By the time you finish, some of them will have been armed robbers, some of them will. So while thinking about that, you also need to find a way to solve that short-term problem. And all over the world, public works is one way of dealing with that kind of problem. So I see the NAPCO to be a stopgap measure to be able to absorb this number of people. And it cannot be wasted if the initiators sit down and identify areas in the economy where opportunities are there for these young people to go there. And government intervention is important when the system fails to do what it's supposed to do. So we have what we call market failure. Then sometimes we also have government failure when government doesn't do what it's supposed to do. But if you allow the system or the market to do what it wants to do, there are certain areas that would not be catered for. Let me give you an example. I always use this kind of framework. You look at our tax system. We are always taxing the same people who pay the direct tax are the same people who continue to pay. But we have area that we can rake in more revenue, but government doesn't seem to look at that area. Property tax. And this is the responsibility of the district assemblies. I can tell you, I don't know where you stay, but I'm not too sure whether anybody has come to your house to ask for property tax over the last 5 years. Nobody has come to my house to ask for property tax. But I know that there's what we call property tax. And even when they come, they want you to pay cash. It means that if you pay cash, the money may not even get to the government. So if the government realizes that if I am able to look at property tax to rake in more money, but I have young people who have finished the university, polytechnic, or these days say technical universities, who are looking for jobs. Can I pick these people, look at this area, get them there, collect that kind of money, make sure that it is collected well, then government get that money. That money will be used to pay them. So you can't say it's waste. So there's waste of resources, unemployment, there's opportunities there. So government has come in to be able to do that. So you have achieved two objectives. You talk about sanitation. If your sanitation is bad, you cannot attract investors. So if we realize that, well, it is important to ensure that our surroundings are clean, it is important that our beaches are clean, then we can engage people to be able to ensure that the police, I'm not saying engage people to just go around, but the system will be such that they will be able to get our beaches clean, our sanitation, everything is clean. We will be able to attract more investors, and the kind of private sector attraction that we are looking for, we'll be able to get it. That means we will also be able to achieve two broad objectives. Health-wise, we are going to enjoy it. Let's take our extension officers. I mean, you go to our villages, many of our farmers don't have access to extension officers, and therefore their yield is quite low. And even when they are able to get good yield, they don't get the market for it. So if government identify this area as a problem and get young people engaged to be able to bring those goods when there's bumper harvest and get them kept so that when the lean season comes, we can make use of it. We've also achieved. So it means that if the initiators are able to identify these opportunities and get, because if you just allow the system to just run, you will not get young people to go in there. But if you are able to identify this and structure it well and get these young people to go in there and do that kind of, perform that kind of service, it means that you are getting benefit, the young people. So it depends on how the program is initiated. Then the exit strategy is very, very important, because those people who are going to engage, I'm yet to know how it's going to be. Are they going to pay their social security and so on? Because I always say that you are supposed to retire at the age of 60. So if you are engaged in the program at the age of 25, and then you are not paying your social security, it means that if you stay in for 3 years, you've lost 3 years. So now if you get a job after 3 years, 28, so it means you will be able to contribute how many years? 32 years. Okay, so depending on the number of years that you spend within that program. So if you are going to pay social security, that will be excellent, because that will then show that that kind of employment is decent, or let's say that job is what is decent. But if there's not going to be any social security and so on, and you cannot continue to absorb all the 100,000 people that come out, the exit strategy will be very important. And we expect that government will not only focus on that, the medium term will also be very important. The long term will also be very important. So thinking through the exit strategy will be able to help people move out after 3 years and move into employment, not necessarily move into unemployment and come and join. That was one of the problems that we encountered with the National Youth Employment Program, which is now Youth Employment Agency. It was also a stopgap kind of initiative, but we did not look at the exit part of it. So people sometimes stay there for a long time and become something like a permanent employment, where what I mentioned as social security and other stuff are not being paid. So it is important that we think through the exit strategy so that it doesn't become another albatross.
Look, let me take a quick break here. When I come back, if I give us one example of what an exit strategy would be if I was employed and I was going around collecting property rates, which is a good thing. 3 years is up, now you have to go where? One doctor friend of mine in the University of Ghana said he met one of his students. He said, "Oh, Kofi, the final year, congratulations." And he says, "When I finish, where am I going?" With such despair that after school, what am I going? The fear of the unknown. So this exit plan, what are some of the things that we can put in place that the exit? But then bear in mind that, like I said, with the good blessing of free SHS, 100,000 more students went to school. So 100,000 more will be coming out in 2 years. What are we doing with them? While these guys are exiting, polling on about 500,000, students coming out of SHS. Some will go to tertiary institutions. What do we do with the rest? We're coming back. Jobs, 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 and employment. The fact that you have a job doesn't mean you're employed. Education. But just before the break, I just wanted to find out from Prof that once the 100,000 nation building corps are out there, doing what they have to do, what then can you do? I mean, they're out there. Maybe I'm an extension officer, done it for 3 years. My time is up. I mean, what can be some of the plans that you put in place that when I leave, I'm not stranded?
Well, I mean, if you take the extension officer, I mean, there's a model like that, and you are a graduate, you've been able to go in there as extension officer, you should be able to understand that agriculture doesn't end there. There is a chain of activities, and I made mention of the fact that transporting goods from the farm gate to the market is a whole chain of activity that many people haven't looked at. So if I am engaged as an extension officer, I expect the program to be able to get some kind of exposure to these young people, to make them know that agriculture has moved on from where we were using hoes and cutlasses, but now it also includes even, conveying or transporting goods from the farm gate. And can you set up maybe an enterprise that will be able to buy these goods from the farmers and distribute it among them? By the time you finish and you think through this, you'll be able to know that, well, as I'm exiting into the same kind of activity. But this time, I am not an extension officer, but I am somebody who is facilitating the movement of agricultural produce from the farm gate to the market centers. And that is a huge economic opportunities that many young people haven't identified. And I expect that the program should be able to have these young people identify other kind of activity related to where they will go, so that when they leave, they will be able to take up those kind of opportunities. We can get similar thing to do in terms of in the environment area. We can get the similar thing to also say about the tax and so on. But if you think through it, by all means, there's going to be exit. And in the long term, if what government is putting in place will yield fruit, like one district, one factory, that industrialization drive, then you see that the economy will be expanding, and then you will get more people not focusing on just the nation builders corps, but then we move into a better long-term kind of employment.
So think through, look at the opportunities in whatever sector you are, so that when you exit, you can plug yourself back in somehow.
Yeah, and the initiators should be able to guide these young people, show them some kind of training, exposure, for them to know that you are not here for a long time, but take advantage of the opportunity to be able to find yourself something at the end of the period.
So if I'm listening to you carefully, maybe in a year and a half, if you are smart enough, you can exit.
You can, even within, yes, you can exit. And you should also know that, whilst you are there, you don't have to feel comfortable. You should be able to apply for jobs here and there and so on and so forth. And that is why I always advise my young people that education doesn't end after examination. Even you educate yourself more after examination. And normally after school, we forget about, you need to be reading, so that when you go for interview, you will be able to carry yourself quite well. So while they are there, they should also be looking for opportunities, read wide, know what is happening and so on. Let me give you a story. I was on the plane with a gentleman who was my student. I didn't know that he was my student, and he has gotten a job in South Africa. And I said, so what did you do? So I did statistics and mathematics. And after my schooling, I started going to the internet, trying to find out how I can do predictive kind of modeling on my own and so on. So I worked with Tigo, I work with this, I work with that. And wherever I go, I don't allow that company to train me, but I train myself. And now everybody wants me to work for him. And he's now getting a job in South Africa. So it means that you yourself have to also try and upgrade yourself, not just wait because I have the job and I'm being paid every month, and that is the end. You upgrade yourself and to be able to move to a higher level.
Look, I've asked this question, I've said this thing so many times that yes, free SHS is a blessing. And there are hundreds and thousands of children now in SHS. Just in 3 years' time, or now 2 years' time, they will all graduate. Assuming half, which will not even be possible, get absorbed into the tertiary institution. That's about 250,000 who will be also fishing for job market. So what do you do? What happens?
Well, I also get a bit concerned about this because I have done analysis of new labor market entrants over a period from, if I remember, 2000 till about 2017, and every year you have the number of people entering the labor market from different levels of education, BC, SSC, and graduate, increasing. but is the labor market able to absorb all of them? We need to look at it from this perspective. An educated society without jobs, for me, and that's me, is better than uneducated kind of society without job. So if you have educated people and they know what they want and where they are, they can be smart and be creative and create something for themselves. But government needs to look at it and plan ahead, because the second year, the third year, they will come to the university, and I'm sure in 5-6 years' time, the free SHS people will be out of the university and will be looking for jobs. I expect that by 6 years, we should have put pragmatic measures in place not to make this kind of the number explode. Because if we wait till 6, 7, 8 years, we will come back and bite our tongue. The inflow is quite heavy, and therefore we should expect to absorb them. I always say that we have our education system reformed in 1987. That shortened the duration a bit, but it seems that we are having people enter the labor market earlier than what is supposed to, because now students at the age of 20, 21, they are out of the university and entering the labor market. And we have to also look at it whether they are ripe to enter the labor market. I think we, as a country, we need to look at the quality of training that we are giving, whether the training is enough, and therefore when they come out of school, they are ready for the labor market. Because if we rush them through and get them to the labor market so early and the jobs are not there, we also have our own challenges. So this is a very difficult or a challenging kind of situation that we find ourselves, but we have to think through it and think ahead from now till 6 years. We don't have to politicize it. And in Ghana, everything is politics. Free SHS, some of us has not been free sixth form. Maybe I wouldn't be able to go to sixth form, because my father told me, no, I can't pay your fees. And I told him, oh, thank God, it's free. And that is why I got an opportunity to go to sixth form. So, I mean, many people are indeed thankful to God for getting this. But we should also be mindful of the fact that we get many people educated, and we have to be prepared to get them absorbed.
Prof, so are we looking at resource or are we looking at skills? Where should the state focus on? I mean, these guys coming out of SHS, is it resources where you go to, yes, starter, where they have these starter programs, or give them skills so they come out and sort of know where to go?
Well, it's a combination. It's a combination. I mentioned that skill education, you need to focus on training their brain, their mind, make them smart. And that is, even if you are going to give somebody a skill, that's a technical and vocational skill, which is very good, the person should also be smart, be taught something that if there's a change of activities in the labor market, that person will be able to adapt. And many a time, you see that people have gone through technical and vocational education. They are carpenters trying to work for you, but sometimes when they bring you a chair, you know that no, this one, look at the angle, it's not the way it is. I mean, if they show you, oh, the button has not been put. So all these things are symptoms of the kind of education. We are just training them how to fix it, but what will make the thing beautiful and what will make the thing acceptable is not something that we try to look at. So that skill training should be total. It shouldn't be I am teaching somebody how to sew, but if you are sewing, you should be able to sew it with perfection, such that it will be comparable to whatever. If something is, I mean, or some of these things are imported, it could be comparable to the imported ones. And that is the kind of skill training that we have to focus on. Sometimes we focus on half of it just to train them to be able to do one or two things, and then as soon as they come out, become half-baked kind of.
I have 5 minutes left. Have we focused too much on the administrative side of learning? Is there too much of it? Because everybody wants a desk job, rather than being able to fit something, unscrew something, stitch something, nail something, plumb something, weld something. Have we focused? Is there an influx of graduates who all want desk jobs? Is that also a problem, or it's just pure economy not stretching enough?
Well, I think it's also a factor. I think the grammar education has been with us, and if you look at the history of our education, I mean, we inherited it from our colonial masters, and when they left us, we needed to train people to fill the vacancies left the civil service, and so the kind of trade that we started with was more of that grammar kind of trade that had been with that for a very long time. And we need to get a balance. We need to get the balance very well. Whilst we train people in the grammar area, we also need to focus on the skill training aspect of it. And because of the fact that that history has been with us, sometimes we think that those who go to vocational and technical training are those who couldn't make the grades. And that is also a factor as we think through some of these things. We should respect those in vocational and technical training, and even that is where the money is. Sometimes we don't even know that is where the money is. So we have to change our mindset and realize that it is not those who are not good, who are academically weak, who go to vocational and technical training. No, a German kind of education system encourages skill training, vocational technical training. That is why Germany is what they are. I mean, I've been there to teach for 6 months, and you can see that in the education system, from the beginning, they know where everybody's talent is. So they shape them so that some will go through the grammar one, but you have many of them going into the, I mean, even those who go to grammar one, by the time they leave, they have something that they can, and that makes me miss the old education system, the old system. I remember those systems. If you are in class 6, you pass common entrance, you go to secondary school, you forgo the 4 years. If you go to middle school, there was something they used to call, I was a young person, but I remember something called continuation. And my senior brother benefited from it. He went to the Form 4, the 4 years, and by the time he finished, he knew how to sew, because they teach you. There was one particular school where one day is set aside for all the classes. So maybe Tuesday, you have all Form 1s in the town going to that particular to learn how to sew, how to do something with your hands and so on. And at the end of the 4 years, some people could do something with their hands. So that is how the combination was there. But these days, that is what GHS was supposed to do, add that kind of workshop to it. But what did we see? We ended up going back to the old one. So we need to look at that part so that some people who may not take the grammar level will be able to acquire skills, and as soon as they leave school, they will be able to do things for themselves. But I would say that whether skill development, whether trying to go, setting yourself up and so on, it depends on how the economy grows. Because even if you set yourself up and try to manufacture this mobile phone, and the economy is not doing you well, people will not get money to come and buy your mobile phone. So whatever you do, whether it's skill training and getting people into vocational technical training and come out and set themselves up, whatever they are going to do, produce, or the service that they are going to provide will be consumed by people in the economy. So if the economy is not doing well, you can't get demand for those products. So if you even set yourself up, you will still not get demand for your products. So policies that will expand the economy, policies that will develop the economy and move us to the next level is something that government should focus on.
Thank you, Professor William Barber, a labor economist, lecturer, University of Ghana. Doc, what's your department?
Economics.
Department.
And I'm proud of my department. Department of Economics.
Department of Economics. I'm sure many years ago, my father was there. Father read economics too. But the number is 024-366-2001. 024-366-2001, and that's Tantees. They make my shirts for the show, so give them a call right by Nyao Clinic. You can visit them wherever you are. They'll get you a shirt. But we are very grateful for Future Education. My doctor is hard to find, so I think very soon I'll be moving my crew there to go interview, because my next question is, should the nation set an agenda so that we all follow, that we know that, listen, if I train my son into steel bending, by all means he's going to get a job? Or will we get out there and just look for a job? So we'll be back to do this all over again, but I'll chase Prof and get this answer. Prof, thank you so much.